Hey,
Hey.
welcome to our first attempt at some bonus content for our viewers and listeners. We're excited. So welcome to the very first episode, part one of the Monroe Files.
I am so excited for this.
I am too. This is going to be where I get to go into the deep, dark crevices of Marilyn Monroe, which sounds kind of dirty at the same time. But, anyways,
It's fine. You just
So-
took my line.
but if you're joining us, yes, usually Ryan is in this with us, but this is mine and Shelly's little adventure right now. Ryan may pop in, make an appearance. We don't know. He may jump on the screen. We haven't decided yet. But me and Shelly decided to kind of undertake this more so me on the research side. Shelly is here to hear the stories and chime in with what she knows. But if you haven't seen it yet, we did an episode back on August 2nd that was over Marilyn Monroe and the conspiracy that surrounded her death. So this is where we're just really gonna just rip it apart, tell you all the good juicy gossip and dirty details. So this is going to be part one, Marilyn and the Kennedy brothers. And what I'm going to do tonight, Shelly, thank you for joining me. Number one, let
My
me
pleasure.
introduce us real quick. If you've never met us, I'm Blake Smith. This is Shelly Pruitt, my partner in the paranormal and true
That's
crime.
right. Whether you want it or not.
Stuck with you to the end of the time.
Stuck with me till the end, buddy.
So I want to jump into it because I got a lot of stuff that I'm going to cover. This one's going to kind of be a long one. It's going to be a lot of details, but it's
So welcome to the Monroe
really
Files.
good. Yes, welcome to the Monroe Files, a 6-part miniseries, Marilyn and the Kennedy brothers, and here we go.
Now, child, you know I like the Kennedys.
I
They
know
got
you
some
do.
serious dirt in those closets. Ooh, big old
But,
skeletons. I'm ready.
You might not be liking them too much after we're done with this episode or this whole
like
series.
Them for the conspiracy theory aspect. I don't think it personally. They were, not the most upstanding citizens, in my opinion, only.
Yeah, I would. After digging into this, I'd kind of have to agree with my opinion only as well. So we know, obviously, and so does everybody else, I'm pretty sure, that the Kennedy themselves are known for their vast fortune and their fortress of a family.
Mm-hmm. They got their own little army there.
Yeah, as well as kind of almost their arrogance that comes with that heritage, if you will. Overall, the men in this family, they were womanizers. The women looked the other way. They had their affairs. Everybody knew it. Joe Kennedy, the senior of the clan, he is kind of the one that I would almost say is responsible for that, because he told the boys whenever they were growing up, get laid as often as you can.
Great fatherly advice, right?
Righto, daddy-o. And so it's kind of, we see that through, it's like JFK took this to heart, and he really ran with it, if you will. I mean, he has been linked to women, and I'm going to throw a couple of them up on the screen. Women such as Jean Tierney, Anita Ekberg, and Judith Campbell Exner, and of course, as well as Marilyn Monroe. There's, I'm sure, a few other women like Inga Avard. I don't remember how to say her last name, but he's also linked to her as well. A lot of powerful women in Hollywood, and also as well as like the underworld. It's kind of interesting. They all had like their secrets going on. And he always talked, when he talked about Robert Kennedy, he had always said that Robert Kennedy was the one with the high moral standards, the Puritan, almost incorruptible, if you will.
But was he?
But was he? Exactly. Or did he just hide it really well? So, excuse me. And in the mix of all of this is a man who's going to play a major part later on in Marilyn Monroe's life, which that is Peter Lawford. Peter Lawford is the brother-in-law to the Kennedy brothers. He is married to Patricia Kennedy, which is the Kennedy's sister, and he becomes this facilitator, if you will, between the Kennedy brothers and their affairs. He is actually quoted later on his deathbed in an unguarded moment that said, quote, "I'm not going to talk about John and his broads because I just can't. And well, I'm not proud of this, but all I will say is that I was Frank's pimp and Frank was John's. It sounds terrible now, but then it was really a lot of fun." That was his deathbed, I guess, confession, if you will. And the Kennedy brothers had this modus operandi of passing their women around to each other. Not just really JFK and RFK or Bobby, but Ted was not as clean as people like
Ted
to think.
Kennedy, Teddy
Uh-huh.
Kennedy.
Yeah.
Chappaquiddick, Michael Skakel. Come on now.
So they had this like JFK would start him and then Bobby would like swoop in and I guess either pick up the pieces or clean it up,
Shoot,
if you will.
he's getting sloppy seconds left and right.
Yep. And so it's around this time in like 1959, 1960 that we're going to pick up in this story whenever it's JFK becomes like the prime candidate for the presidency. And in doing so, we all know the singer Frank Sinatra, good old Blue Eyes himself,
The chairman of the board,
decided to take it upon himself to befriend JFK and get this lovely relationship going with him because he wanted to be friends with high powerful people. We know he was well connected, and JFK was just another basically notch on his belt, if you will. And it's also during this time where we see the first link between JFK and Marilyn is Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra and Marilyn knew each other whenever they co-starred in their flub film in 1954, The Girl in the Pink Tights. So there's already like a little minor link here happening between them. I'm going to stop right here and actually say I am not going to try and debate the length and depth of Marilyn and JFK's affair. A lot of people think it's decades
unknown.
long. It is.
Yeah.
It is actually very unknown. There are very few times that their paths could have or actually did cross. And it really kind of almost boils down to a one-night stand. Pretty much it. She had more of infatuation with him. The affair that we really are going to dig into is the one that she had with Bobby Kennedy. That's the one where there's a lot more evidence to, and the one that leads up to a lot of crazy crap. Now, again, through a bevy of beauties, this Sinatra-Kennedy-Lawford relationship blossoms because Sinatra starts flying the JFK or the Kennedy administration out to his casino, the Cal Neva, which we'll get into later on, the Cal Neva Lodge, for special occasions and shows that was headlined by members of the Rat Pack. And of course, there was a lot more play than work. FBI documents reveal a lot of the information of the women Sinatra brought to the Kennedy's attention at Palm Springs. And basically, it says, quote, the FBI document, "It is a known fact that at the Sands Hotel is owned by hoodlums, and that while the senator, JFK, Sinatra, and Lawford were there, showgirls from all over town were running in and out of the senator's suite." That's a freaking FBI document. Okay. So with this newfound relationship, he flies an entourage out to come see a performance. Now, this is going to consist of, again, throwing them up here for you. It's going to be JFK and Ted Kennedy, so the Kennedy brothers. It is also Peter and Pat Lawford, brother-in-law and sister. Rat Pack member Dean Martin and his wife, Jean Martin. An agent, Mort Viner. A restaurateur, Gloria Romanoff, not her husband. Her husband did not come. And friend and publicist of Sinatra, Patricia or Pat Nuckel. Mm-hmm. And he flies them out to the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas on February 7th, 1960. Now, also making an appearance in this wonderful little clan is none other than Judith Exner herself. And it does state in her biography that, she's ended up sitting next to Ted Kennedy. She sits across from JFK. He's flirting and smiling, all that stuff. And that's kind of the moment that this affair starts happening between the two of them.
Now, I think it's important to note here that Judith Exner, that she was also rumored to be Sam Giancana's girl, a very powerful, the most powerful mob boss in Chicago at the time.
She was actually known to appear on both his arm and the arm of Johnny Rosselli as well, which is the West Coast mafia boss.
Mm-hmm.
So super kind of.
I'm not going into
connected.
The mob thing that started either. So
right, yeah.
Just know that Sam Giancana, Judith Exner was one of his girls, one of his girlfriends. So that's playing with a little bit of fire whenever you got the head of the mafia who's got a girl, and all of a sudden she's hanging out with the president. Might cause a little tension.
Or soon to be president at that time too, but later on the president too. But yes, Johnny Rosselli and Sam Giancana Those are the two that she is known to have been linked to. So Sam Giancana, the one that's on the screen right now, is actually a silent business partner in the Calneva Lodge with Frank Sinatra. So you see this web kind of starting to really kind of thicken. And Marilyn really kind of has no idea, but she's about to place herself dead center in the middle of it. Now, also during this time, you have another very powerful player that plays in Marilyn's story that is rising to power in Cuba, and that is Fidel Castro. We're in a huge anti-communist, Marxist-Leninist Red Scare era, where they were trying to stop and blacklist anybody associated with the Communist Party. He ends up rising to power, and it is alleged that he shut down, well, not alleged, but he shut down all the mob-run casinos, which is what ended up pissing off the mob here. And so during this meeting is supposedly when a deal was struck, the first of a couple of deals, actually, between the mafia and the Kennedy administration, allegedly. They basically said, you know what, we'll help you out. We'll help you get elected. And once you get in there, you take over Cuba and invade Cuba, and you get our casinos back up and running. So after this, that's what the whole flying out there was for, was to have this little chit-chat and talk.
This little tete-a-tete.
And Judith Exner kind of becomes this liaison between Kennedy and Giancana. And she ends up supposedly coordinating up to 10 separate meetings between the two of them. One of the, and what's surprising about this is after that, in May of 1960, after they meet in February of 1960, JFK ends up carrying West Virginia against Hubert Humphrey in a 2-1 vote, which was extremely crazy of that time, of a place that was 95% Protestant, for a Catholic candidate
Catholics
to carry that much of the vote. So do we have something just yet? I don't know. Now
they say in Chicago that the dead people vote.
And that's actually where we're going, because around this time, well, actually previously, I guess you could say at this time, supposedly JFK, or it could have been Joe Kennedy, one of the two, it's not really known exactly who, or it's alleged to have happened, met with, again, Sam Giancana and Mayor Richard Daley of Chicago in order to help JFK take Illinois and win the presidency that way. You have a couple of things that happen here. You have some FBI wiretaps that come forward that reveal that Giancana actually contributed $150,000, which was distributed by Sinatra and his manager, also who worked for Giancana, Paul Emilio Skinny Diamato. Skinny is what he was called.
Skinny Diamato. Yeah,
Diamato.
You gotta have a nickname. Forget about it.
Yeah,
go get old Skinny.
He was the manager at the Calneva Lodge for Sinatra, and in the wiring or the bugging of Giancana's, wherever they were, it never said where they were. He's actually overheard telling Judith Campbell, you know what, if it weren't for me, your boyfriend wouldn't be in the White House. So it's kind of like, did it happen? Did it not? Where's this stuff coming from?
I don't think that that's something that Giancana would boast about if it didn't happen. If a lot of his money went there, then yeah, he's probably going to claim a little credit.
Yeah.
Even if it was just his money, it could have been more.
Yeah. So it's also revealed later years that in more FBI documents that there were over 70 telephone calls to the White House in varying lengths between JFK and Judith Campbell Exner. She had a private line to the White House. Interesting how all these affairs, you'll see later on, tend to have a private line to the White House. So by the mid-1960s, you have this presidential candidate, in my mind, from everything that I've read, that's rubbing elbows with the mafia. I mean, essentially.
Sounds like he's a purchased president.
Almost. That's what it sounds like. You have the highest man in the entire world, basically, rubbing elbows with the highest men in the underworld.
Underworld.
I mean,
yep.
That's a scary kind of thought.
And I don't think that it doesn't happen today. I just think that it stays a lot more hidden.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I completely agree. I think with all the stuff, which we won't go down because this is not about the mob.
No. We don't.
We'll be here all night.
This is not a mob podcast, but you have to understand the gravity of uh, being friends, publicly friends with someone like that, being seen at a table with people that are associated with them. You also have to understand the gravity of the fact that it can be proven that they're giving you campaign money and that you appear to be granting them favors once you're in office.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, you got to understand the thickness of the plot that Marilyn is really going to step deep into later on down it within a couple of months from this time that this is all happening. So, matter of fact, we know by this time that all this has taken place, Kennedy is already being concerned with the Marilyn problem. You know, she has already started to have loose lips. She's already started to let it slip to friends that she's seeing somebody that's high up in the government, or, you know, that's well known, popular, if you will. There is one friend at this time that Anthony Summers interviewed. Now, Anthony Summers is the author of Goddess: A Secret Life of Marilyn Monroe, which is what the new documentary on Netflix is covers, is his book. He interviewed like 600 over 600 people, or he has over 600 hours worth of interviews, something along those lines, that have never been heard. He did all this in the early 1980s when they reopened the Marilyn Monroe case, and he actually interviewed a guy named Arthur James, who's a longtime friend of Marilyn Monroe's, who gives a little bit of validity to Marilyn and JFK's relationship. And I quote, I'm going to read you the conversation, and I quote, it says, his last name's James. It says, James, quote, that's where the Kennedys came back in there. Summers, after the collapse of her marriage to Miller, is that correct? James, yes. Summers, were you aware of it at that time? James, oh yes, but Jack, that started in the early and mid 50s. Summers, it started way back in the 50s. James, yes. And of course it did. He used the Malibu Inn and drank at the Malibu Cottage, the raunchiest looking thing you've ever seen in your life. Summers, good Lord, they actually got away with staying out there and walking on the pier? James, oh yeah, because Jack wasn't known here at all. He was a senator. He was totally unknown here. No one ever expected Jack to become the president or the nominee. He's just some smart ass rich kid's son that became senator. I find that alludes to two things in my mind. It alludes to nobody expected him to become the nominee. So how did he become the nominee? Did he have help? And it also alludes to Marilyn and JFK's relationship as well. You know, that you have a longtime friend saying, no, it started way back in the mid 50s.
Someone that was her confidant.
Yes. Yes. So my question becomes at that point, was Kennedy okay with the affair because he wasn't as known? He wasn't as popular. Didn't matter if it was as public, or was he more brazen back then? Of course, I think that would be an answer of yes.
You know, you always get away with what you think you can get away with. And again, there very well is a point that he wasn't known in that area. But my question is, how is Marilyn Monroe not known in that area?
I know. And see, and then wouldn't you think
that's the one thing that doesn't make sense to me? Because even if you didn't know who he was, like, I couldn't tell you a senator from another state more than likely if they walked past me on the sidewalk.
Right.
But let George Clooney walk by. Oh, honey, hi.
And she is at a pretty high point in her career. I mean, she has, if we're talking mid 50s,
she is known.
Yeah, she's already done Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which was a huge hit. You know, I mean, that's just a couple of years after that. So how is it that they're not digging into him if she is walking on the pier with him? Who's Marilyn's
the guy
man?
with Marilyn? Yeah,
exactly. So
that doesn't exactly ring completely true to me, because I don't know how she wouldn't have been recognized. I get how he may not have at that time,
right?
But I don't see how they don't know her.
I agree. That's the only thing about that statement that I agree with you on. That it's kind of like she is so high on the celebrity list at this point. I mean, she's internationally known at this point, pretty much. So, but so he ends up becoming concerned about her and her spilling the beans and talking about their relationship. Nobody's going to vote for a man cheating on his wife, Marilyn Monroe, a Catholic president at that. I mean, my God, you know, I mean, she could spill everything and ruin everything that they're working for. However, he does go on to win the candidacy. We know that. He was our president. We know that. But it's after he gives his victory speech at the Los Angeles Coliseum that you have a couple of witnesses that are actually starting to talk about the intimacy that is so brazen in front of everybody between Marilyn and Kennedy, because there's a head bartender that's from Romanov's, Gloria Romanoff's restaurant, where they frequented a lot. He's at this party. And he basically says, yeah, Kennedy was there. And soon I saw Marilyn Monroe walk in with Sammy Davis. And then the next thing I knew, Kennedy and Marilyn were close to each other and very open about their feelings towards each other, and that he thought that Sammy Davis was basically as a cover, to bring her in as a cover so that JFK could spend some time with her.
Now that's interesting because Sammy Davis, if you don't know who he is, he's an African-American man that was part of the Rat Pack. And a lot of the places that the Rat Pack played in those days, Sammy Davis was not allowed to use the same entrance that the rest of the Rat Pack were, because there were still a lot of places that were segregated. You know, different bathrooms, different entrances for people of different races. So I find that interesting that she's walking in with him. Now she was, she was it Ella Fitzgerald that was the one that she would go and said, if you would let Ella Fitzgerald play this club, I will sit every night in the front row that she sings and listen to her. And she did. So I find that interesting that they have Sammy Davis walk her in.
She was very progressive for her time. She wanted equality. She fought, stood for
My
equality.
question is, how did
she
club,
get away with it?
Yeah, how did the peoples that own the club or the bouncers or whatever allow Sammy Davis to escort in Marilyn Monroe, knowing the temperature of the time?
Let me ask you this question. In 1960, when Marilyn literally is at the height of her career,
who's going to tell her no?
Would you tell her no as she walked in with Sammy Davis? I wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't.
Who's there to stop her? She's Marilyn Monroe.
Damn it.
Woman had balls. I'm gonna say it.
Yeah, that's very curious to me, being the temperature of the time. That would have been something that would have gotten a second glance. That would have been like, and again, that's the way it was back then. That's part of the history.
It's part of it, yeah.
So
she ends up being at this party. There's multiple witnesses that see her there. Multiple witnesses see her with JFK and hanging out and being kind of overly friendly or intimate with him, if you will, flirting. And it's after this that JFK is basically kind of like, okay, we need to make sure she has her wits about her, basically knows not to talk. So there was this attempt made. She's shooting the Misfits at this point in 1960. So we're at the later part of August of 1960. And there's this attempt made to, and I quote, put a bridle on her, or talk to Marilyn about putting a bridle on herself and her mouth and not talking too much because it was getting to be a story around the country, end quote. Put a bridle on her mouth. That's one of the little Rat Pack members or mafia people. But anyways,
who said that?
It actually did not say who said it, but it said that it had been reported multiple times.
Was this something picked up on a wiretap or just something overheard and they were unable to discern who said it? Okay.
Something overheard, yes.
Put a bridle on her like she's livestock. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So on August 13th, 1960, she's invited by Sinatra out to the Calneva Lodge again. Or no, not again. Sorry. She's invited out to the Calneva Lodge. She's struck by this kindness and generosity that he is showing towards her. She thinks that there's going to be a fun little get-together. However, the get-together has some ulterior motives. Now, according to FBI agents, also in attendance that weekend were Joe Kennedy, JFK, Sam Giancana, and Johnny Rosselli.
So Daddy Kennedy and the two of the biggest mobsters known at the time.
And,
East Coast and West Coast, or Chicago. Your new Democratic candidate is also there. The full account, this is the thing that gets me, the full account of this weekend has never fully emerged, and I doubt it's ever going to. This is one of those that is super mysterious in her life. To me, it's almost more mysterious than the actual lost weekend that it happens later on in her life. But whatever it was that happened, it was enough for Marilyn to return to the set of The Misfits the following week, upset, dismayed, slurring her speech, and she would later be found by her acting coach, Paula Strasberg, in her room,
unconscious and overdosing on pills. To which Paula had to run up, scoop it out of her mouth, clean up the vomit off her, get her to the hospital, pump her stomach, and she would make a full recover from that. However, it's from this moment, in my opinion, just throughout all the research and all the time that I've spent in Marilyn's life and in these books, which has been about the past 15, 16 years, that this is the pinpointed moment that her mental state never fully recovers. This is where, if I had to classify time, this is where the downhill begins.
This is where she breaks.
This is where she breaks.
A break that she can't fix, can't heal.
It is where a straight up nosedive, because after this, there is a series of freaking gut punches that happened to her. Let's Make Love premieres at the end of August of 1960. It is a flop. It is considered a moderate success, but it's still a flop. She had a tawdry affair with her co-star Yves Montand at the time that was highly publicized. And matter of fact, part of the affair was used for the publicity for the film in the marketing of it. That ends. Her marriage is in dire straits with Arthur Miller. She had become known to the FBI at this point because of her ties to Arthur Miller and his being found guilty in contempt of Congress for not revealing names of friends that had communist leanings or left leanings. And she had also supposedly suffered at least one miscarriage, if not two, during the Miller marriage. But there is at least one that a friend talks about later on. That's like, no, she called me and was like, this is the happiest time I was in my life, and showed a picture of herself with Arthur's father. And he's like, why? And she said, because I was pregnant then. And she supposedly did suffer a miscarriage during their marriage. Arthur wanted children. Marilyn, I go back and forth of whether she actually did or didn't. There's a lot of people that say she wanted to be a mother, but there are a lot of people who said that it feared her greatly. So it's kind of, but anyways, that's going on with what is happening at this point. She had already found, the reason why it's also in dire straits, not only because of the affair, she had also found a notebook that Arthur Miller had done when they were on their honeymoon over in Europe. Basically, I think it was their honeymoon, if I remember correctly. Over in Europe, where she was filming The Prince and the Showgirl. And in this notebook, he had talked about how he was embarrassed of her. He was embarrassed he married her. She embarrassed him in front of their friends. And allegedly on one of the pages was the words whore scribbled as well. Mm. So she kind of figured out what her husband thought of her. But even still.
But he married her. So there was something about her he liked at some point.
So I think, I did not put this in the notes, but I'll go into it real quick.
Okay.
Because we're kind of jumping out of the timeline real fast. But I think that Arthur Miller married Marilyn Monroe because it was along the lines of like I've heard it used before. It's Svengali effect, where it's more like he had the power over her and was using her. He was. The
Svengali effect is when. Yeah. Well, what it is basically it's like you're entrancing. Someone's entranced with you. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Svengali is very, now hang on. Never mind. I'm not going to say it because I don't recall exactly what the story is. So I don't want to be misquoted or sound foolish because I don't know the correct story. So I'm just going to say, no, go look up what the Svengali is. Yeah. Someone known as Svengali is someone who can, infatuate you and get you to do their bidding, because it's like they put a spell on you.
Yeah.
So did Marilyn put a spell on him, or did he put a spell on her?
I think it was he to her. I think she was infatuated with him. I think because he was this very well-known playwright. Mm-hmm.
Death of a Salesman. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Probably his best known one.
Probably. And all she wanted to be was a good actress. So I think that there was this infatuation from her to him. And I think that that's kind of that entrancing power that he had over her.
Marilyn, understand. I married a writer too. But then I divorced him just like you did.
Yeah. So jumping back to 1960, after her tawdry affair, she's found the notebook, all of this stuff. She is starring in The Misfits at this point. She's filming The Misfits. The Misfits is written by Arthur Miller. The character Rosalind is written for Marilyn as a gift in the beginning. However, now that they're marriage is falling
It's
apart.
soured.
It's a nightmare. He's rewriting the scenes that she spent hours learning. He's using her own real life events as character traits for Rosalind, so she has to act it out again and relive it, and it's just torture. Um, she ends with this filming. At that same time, Clark Gable drops dead in November of 1960. She's blamed publicly for that because of her unprofessionalism on set and being late and the stress that it caused. It's just,
Yeah, she got blamed for killing Rhett Butler. Frankly,
yeah,
my dear, I don't give a damn
yeah,
if you don't know who Clark Gable was or what he
yeah,
played.
yeah. And then also in November of 1960, she announces her divorce from Miller, like that we're going to get a divorce. And she uses the following year, January 21st of 1961, inauguration day, Kennedy's inauguration day, to run down to Mexico and get a quickie divorce because she was told the press would be more on him than on you. And
More
boy, were they
focused. That's
wrong.
right. Yeah,
They
sure they would
actually
be.
swarmed her ass outside the courthouse after she had gotten a divorce. So all of this shit is happening. And Anthony Summers, going back to him, and by the way, here's a picture of Anthony Summers. He actually got a hold of John Hudson, the director of The Misfits, and started asking questions. He got to interview him and ask him questions. And this is one of the interview conversations that took place. Summers says, quote, presumably you were very abruptly aware of the decline when you started The Misfits. Hudson, quote, I was aware from the beginning. And I saw that there was something that she was not the fresh little girl that I'd known originally. Very soon we were aware that she was a problem. She'd be late on the set always. Sometimes the whole morning would go by. Sometimes she'd be all right. Occasionally she'd be practically non-compos mentis. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Summers says,
Which
obviously,
is basically she's not with it. She's
right,
not coherent.
right. Summers says, obviously, because the cause was the pills. Hudson, the narcotics were the problem. Summers, did you account for it because her marriage was breaking up to Miller? Was this upsetting her so deeply? Or, Hudson says, and hesitates, I discovered this in the course of the picture. I remember saying to Miller one day, I said, you know, that if she went on at the rate that she was going, why, she'd be in an institution in 2 or 3 years or dead. And I said, anyone who allows her to take a drug ought to be shot. It was almost an accusation against him, an indictment against Miller.
Almost as if he was, because you know what I do. That verbal abuse that can happen, those little digs that wears you down, that kind of thing. If you've ever been in a relationship like that, you know what it does to your psyche, and it will make you turn inward on yourself to finally start believing that what one person is telling you over the person who's supposed to love you, whenever they're telling you horrible things, you begin to not necessarily believe it, but you think, oh, God, maybe they're right.
Right.
And if you know, we don't know what went on behind closed doors. Arthur Miller, being a writer, could have been very cutting and very biting in his words he used with her in private. And being that she was a very fractured kind of soul to begin with,
She really was.
He was basically just making those cracks deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
So we get into January of 1961. She's experienced all of this within the last 4 or 5 months, and she's now divorced. And with all this narcotic, barbiturate, however you want to classify it, alcohol abuse, the mentality that she has, she turns to her New York psychoanalyst, Dr. Marion Chris, and asks her what she can do. Chris's response to her was that she needed to check into a hospital for, quote, a nice long rest. And this is another one of those things that, for Marilyn, this was again under false pretenses, it seemed like. She was actually institutionalized at the Payne Whitney Psychiatric Clinic, a place that she should have never been. I mean, her mother and grandmother both suffered from mental health issues as well. Her grandmother died while institutionalized, and her mother remained institutionalized for the remainder of her life. So she is a big time fear of turning out like them. And it wasn't until a sympathetic nurse handed her a phone that she called the one man that she knew she could count on to come get her. And that was Joe DiMaggio. And Joe DiMaggio basically called the clinic and said, you need to release my wife. Granted, they're divorced 6 years by now. You need to release my wife to me. And when they refused to, he said, that's fine. I'll be there tomorrow and I'll take the hospital apart, quote, brick by brick until I find her. And with the objections, they gave her over to him, and he got her out of there the following day.
Right, because she had been nothing. She had technically done nothing at the point that they put her in there for a nice long rest. She had not at that point. She hadn't been institutionalized because she harmed herself. And she did not. If she had checked herself in, she was legally allowed to check herself out at any point. But for whatever reason, they were not. I mean, they didn't want to let her go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and they had no right to hold her. Yeah.
And so basically, he used DiMaggio used his power as like, I'll rip your freaking hospital apart brick by brick. I don't give a shit.
Yeah, and Joe DiMaggio didn't care. Yeah, he didn't.
No,
he didn't have to give a damn.
He really was
loved her.
The one that unconditionally loved her. I mean,
couldn't live with her, but he loved her.
I would say that there are reports and claims of him having a little bit of an abusive streak and putting his hands on her. But I think all in all, I think he's the one out of everybody that she had ever been with. I think he truly unconditionally loved her. But what the problem was that he loved Norma Jean. He didn't know how to love Marilyn Monroe. That's the difference. He loved the woman that she was, not the movie star that she was. And that's where they broke away from each other, because she wanted to let her skirt blow up on a subway train or a subway grate. So that's kind of where Marilyn's at the beginning of 1961. Now, at the same time, you have this plot that is starting to take place with the Kennedy administration, and it's the assassination of Fidel Castro. Because Fidel Castro is in big time cahoots at this point with Khrushchev in the Soviet Union, and basically asking for help. And so they start to put in a plan what we know today is the Bay of Pigs invasion, which was the least covert military mission, I think, ever on the face of the planet.
It damn near started another world war. Yep. Now, the person who's credited for getting us out of the Bay of Pigs, if you don't know the story, it was Robert Kennedy. So JFK gave the command to send it to tell them to, back down and step away and all that kind of stuff. And they gave no answer. And they gave no answer. And they gave no answer. And they were ready to basically start unloading, start this big war. And it was Bobby Kennedy, a cooler head in the moment, prevailed and said, send it again. And when they sent it the second time, everything kind of began to calm down. Everybody kind of started to back up like, hey, I think it was that thing that everybody had a few minutes to think about and go, hey, do we really want to do this?
Right.
So that cooler head going, wait, send this stuff again. Okay. Everybody back up. Yeah.
See, and the thing was as well is that Fidel Castro knew about this invasion. I mean, the only thing he did not know, he knew that there was going to be an attempt made on his life prior to the invasion. He just did not know the date and the time. That was basically it. Mm-hmm. And it's not really until in front of the Church Committee in 1971, which the Church Committee was a Senate Select Committee that investigated abuses by the CRA, NSA, FBI, and IRS. So in front of the Church Committee in 1975, Frank Sturgis, aka Frank Fiorini, testified that, quote, a mafia CIA assassination plot involving Santo Trafficante, Sam Giancana, and Johnny Rosselli had arranged for Castro's mistress Marita Lorenz to drop botulism tablets supplied by Giancana into Castro's drink. And shortly before the invasion, the news broke that he was seriously ill. He disappears from public view. That's Castro. And the CIA is like, hey, our plan worked. And no, it didn't.
No, it didn't.
And so that became a huge embarrassment on the Kennedy administration. This would have been the military plot to invade Cuba to get the mob run casinos back for the mafia. This was the attempt.
And I don't know about you, but I didn't know that the CIA had a branch called the Mafia. And I didn't know the Mafia was in the habit of supplying the CIA agents little special tricks like botulism pills to use. Yeah. You'd think the CIA would have their own chemists and stuff like that.
You would think. But see, here's the issue with all this. We already know that Marilyn has loose lips. Okay. We know she's talking to people. Now you have Marilyn, who is probably at this point the most powerful woman popular woman in the world. We're talking 1961. She's at the height of her career. She's at least the most photographed woman in the world at this point. And she is having these mental health issues. She is lying on couches of Dr. Marion Chris and Dr. Ralph Greenson, who's her psychiatrist on the West Coast. And part of the therapy of her time was to keep a journal so that they could discuss matters in her life in their therapy sessions. Now, here's a little fun little tidbit for you here. First off, many witnesses say that there actually was a little red diary that she kept, or a little red journal. That was like her conversation. She wrote all of her conversations down with anybody, her therapist, supposedly JFK, RFK. It didn't matter. She wrote it down. Dr. Greenson had, or was allegedly tied to the Communist Party. He was supposedly on the secret list of analysts approved for party members. He also happened to be the brother-in-law to Mickey Rudin, who was Sinatra's lawyer and would later become Marilyn's lawyer. That's Rudin on the left. And Rudin married Elizabeth Greenspoon.
Greenspoon? Mm-hmm.
Greenspoon being her maiden name and the original last name of Dr. Greenson. So Dr. Greenson and Elizabeth Greenspoon are brother and sister. Mickey Rudin, who was Sinatra and Marilyn's lawyer, worked for Gangtier and Brown, who were prominent in representing Hollywood personalities that had been blacklisted by the Un-American Activities Committee because of their communist ties. This is the psychiatrist she's laying on the couch for.
That she's part of therapy is to talk. And to talk about things that you can't talk about anywhere else or with anyone else. Out of fear, out of whatever, you just talk to them. That is your trusted safe space person. And she's got a lot to talk about.
He's also the one that tells her, that suggests to her basically that she should start seeing Dr. Hyman Engelberg, which becomes...
I am not going to see anybody named Hyman. It's just not happening.
Which he ends up becoming her physician. But he was also a very zealous member of the Communist Front organization, Hollywood Arts, Science, and Professions Council. He is a member of the Los Angeles Communist Party, along with his wife, and archives of those of that communist, or of the Los Angeles Communist Party, reveal numerous attendances at parties and meetings. He's also an instructor at the Communist People's Education Center and is featured on their brochures. These are the type of doctors that Marilyn is surrounding herself with. And so you can see why basically you have some conflicts of interest here. You have the president's mistress being psychoanalyzed and surrounded by individuals who have ties to the Communist Party. Yes, who has tied to the Communist Party while holding on to state secrets.
And some mob secrets, allegedly.
Some mob secrets. It had gotten out at this point to her friends that she knew state secrets. Allegedly, one of the state secrets she knew was the assassination of Fidel Castro himself. And it had gotten out.
We keep saying the assassination of Fidel Castro, but that didn't actually happen. I believe he died of cancer.
I think he did. It was like 90 something.
Maybe we should say the
attempted assassination. Sorry.
Yes.
Attempted assassination.
Yeah. Fidel Castro lived to a ripe old age. They never got him. He died of, and it was cancer, was it not? I believe it was cancer.
I think so. Don't quote me.
Yeah, don't get me lying. Don't get me lying. I'm trying to remember. Ladies were a long time ago.
But this obviously, had it gotten out, would have been devastating for the entire Kennedy clan and administration. And Dr. Greenson and his associates literally had the source that could bring it all down. So Marilyn
right there on their couch.
Marilyn is essentially one of the most powerful women in the country at this point, based on knowledge that she had alone.
Powerful or dangerous?
Dangerous. I would say dangerous. Both dangerous and powerful. And so she would end up holding all these secrets. She didn't let anything go. She carried them all the way through the end of 1961 and into 1962. But little by little, she would continue to mentally decline until it all comes to a head in 1962. Now, 1962 is where it starts to get real juicy. So I'm going to break this down for you real quick. I'm going to build things up for you. Marilyn has 3 failed marriages behind her already. And a chance meeting with Bobby Kennedy is on the horizon. In which she becomes insanely infatuated with both the Kennedy brothers. And this is my opinion. This is the meeting that would put into motion what would lead up to the tragic Saturday, Sunday, August 4th, August 5th of 1962. So I'm going to build this web for you. You're going to enjoy this, Shelley. So follow me here. I love my
conspiracy theories. Let's go.
Follow me here. Let's build this web again real quickly. So, and I'm going to read my notes because it's a lot. You have Marilyn Monroe, who's connected to JFK through their affairs. who's also having an affair with Judith Campbell Exner, lover, girlfriend, and associate of both Chicago Mafia boss Sam Giancana, West Coast Mafia boss Johnny Rosselli. JFK is connected to Peter Lawford, his brother-in-law, through his sister Pat, and both men are connected to Lawford's fellow Rat Pack member Frank Sinatra. Lawford through the Rat Pack and JFK through his friendship. Sinatra is the owner of the Calneva with silent business partner Sam Giancana. We're just going to string these webs back and forth, as well as a past co-star and alleged affair of Marilyn Monroe. And also at this time is the placement of Mickey Rudin, Marilyn's lawyer, Sinatra's lawyer in her life. Sinatra is also, go ahead.
How does he get placed in there? Was he recommended
It's more
to her?
of a-
Was the
yeah,
lawyer recommended?
Yeah.
Do we know who recommends him? Does somebody say, "Oh, you should use this because that's who Sinatra uses," or does Sinatra say, "I got a guy for you"?
As far as I know, as far as I have read and understood, Sinatra said about him and the next one that he referred both of these two individuals, Mickey Rudin and this next one I'm about to talk about, into Marilyn's life.
So Sinatra says, "Hey, I got a guy."
Basically, I've got a person.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
We've said several times, and I did not know how the connection was, how she actually got hooked up with those two, with the
Supposedly,
psychiatrist and the lawyer.
Supposedly, it was Sinatra's pushing of Mickey Rudin into Marilyn's life. Then, of course, Mickey Rudin is brother-in-law to Dr. Greenson.
Okay, go ahead. Continue on.
So Sinatra's also claimed to have been involved with the placement of Hollywood publicist and his friend, Patricia or Pat Newcomb, as Marilyn's publicist. We've already gone over the fact that Rudin and Greenson are brother-in-laws. We know that. However, Greenson's also instrumental in placing, Dr. Greenson, psychiatrist, is instrumental in placing Eunice Murray, Marilyn's housekeeper, and Eunice's son-in-law, Norman Jeffries, Marilyn's handyman, in her life as well. And I found one little interesting piece of information. Yeah, you with me? It's kind of confusing.
I'm with you because I'm seeing another connection here, but go ahead.
Greenson's also the landlord of Eunice Murray and Norman Jeffries because he took over their mortgage when they couldn't afford it. It's all just, anyways.
And Sinatra is connected to Giancana, and if Giancana wanted to know shit about the president, what better way than to place a housekeeper for Marilyn in her, who they just happen to be able to control the housekeeper because they have their mortgage.
Ta-da! Also at this point, you have Bobby Kennedy, who's been appointed Attorney General of the United States by JFK, which is a move that pissed Hoover off because he saw the Kennedy brothers as snot-nosed, womanizing
snot-nosed brats. That's right.
And so Hoover begins keeping tabs on the Kennedy brothers, as well as the mafia, including Giancana and Hoffa. We know Jimmy Hoffa. And the rest of their
We don't know where he is, but we know about him.
We don't know where he is, but we know about him. As well as the rest of the mafia counterparts that they have. And this also includes surveillance from the CIA, FBI, and Secret Service on the mafia, Giancana, and Hoffa. Bobby Kennedy also launched a huge operation to bring down organized crime and the mafia, particularly Hoffa and Giancana. And in turn,
Hoffa was a labor board razzle-razzer. He's making a lot of noise and causing a lot of conflict, and plus he was stealing pensions. So it's like, right.
Yeah. And in turn, Hoffa and Giancana started to build surveillance against Bobby Kennedy and JFK, as well as keeping tabs on Hoover. They wanted the dirt. They wanted the nasty that they could get.
Dirt on each other. And Bobby Kennedy, pretty much as a way to do one of these to the mafia, says, guess what? We're investigating the mafia now. How you like that?
Yep.
After the mafia had been left alone for what, almost 20 years?
Something.
15 years or something.
Yeah. And that all boils down to the CIA, FBI, Secret Service, the mafia, Giancana and Hoffa particularly, the Kennedy brothers, and Hoover all began keeping tabs on Marilyn Monroe for various reasons. Because everybody wanted to know what this woman knew. And she was sitting on a political bombshell of secrets, whether that was the assassination of Fidel Castro or her affair with JFK, that could bring down most, if not all, of these players in some form or fashion. Because it's all tied together. And her fatal flaw in all of this was the fact that she wrote the shit down in her freaking journal at the request of her psychiatrist. Now, a lot of what she wrote down supposedly was romantic endeavors. And this secret diary has been in heavy debate over the years because it has never been
Where
seen
is
again.
it?
Exactly. It's never been seen again. We'll get to where I think it is in later episodes. A lot of witnesses claim that she did this toward the end of her life because she was fearful for her life. By 1962, she knew she was being followed. So we have this woman that has now placed herself as the centerpiece of a dangerous, incestuous, intertwined circle of influence and forces countermanding one another. She is smack dab in the middle of it. And in my opinion, I don't think she knew just how deep. I think she knew, but I don't think she knew just how deep.
It's one of those things where you don't realize that you're in the middle of the hurricane until you feel the wind and the water on your face.
Exactly.
And then it's very real.
That's exactly it. Yes. So we can kind of figure out where she gets this infatuation with the Kennedy brothers by dated letters that she dates one to her former father-in-law, Isidore Miller, Arthur Miller's father, dated February 2nd, 1962, about a chance meeting she had with Bobby Kennedy and how excited she was that he, quote, wanted to meet me. Wanted to meet me. So we know this is the first meeting. And she said it was the previous night. So we know that by February the 1st of 1962, Bobby Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe had met. And it's also confirmed later that she and he met at a dinner party at the Lawfords' house that they were throwing for Bobby and Ethel Kennedy for a 14-country goodwill tour that they were doing for him with being the attorney general and all that good shit. She immediately began to tell close friends, though, that she was having a date with Bobby. And it wasn't a date. Pat wrote her and was like, you have to meet my brother. You got to meet my brother. It's got to happen. So Danny Greenson, Dr. Greenson's son, actually kind of recalls some of that stuff for that night. He says, quote, I was in the dining room one day and she was talking about going over to the Lawfords' home. Marilyn is who he's talking about. It says, I want something to talk to him about. Summers, Robert Kennedy, Danny, right. We talked all about some political questions. She actually ended up writing them down and putting them in her purse, and then she went there. And supposedly that's what happened. She wrote them down on a napkin. She got dressed to kill and walked in the room and struck up a conversation that her and Bobby quickly bonded over. She reported to him that she knew Hoover was following her with his goons, as it's quoted. And in an interview with Gloria Romanoff again, Anthony Summers, she comes forward and she actually says, quote, she was seated with Bobby and had some little notes feeling that she really wasn't quite bright enough for the crowd. And at one point, he got up and called his father long distance to say he was seated with Marilyn Monroe and would his father like to say hello to Marilyn. Summers asked who. Romanoff says, this is Bobby. Summers says, yeah, and Romanoff says, and I think he asked her to dance. They did that. So this is their chance meeting that they're having. This is the first one they're meeting. And there's already this infatuation, this flirtation, this things going on. It really skyrockets with JFK as well, because Marilyn has always chased powerful men, eminent men. She's been very smart with her choices and putting powerful men in her life to help advance herself, not only her career, but her as a woman as well, in my opinion. But she also had the talent that helped advance her career. But now she's got the eye of the two most powerful men in the entire country. And that is, well, three. That
Hoover. Don't forget Hoover.
Yeah. That's very true.
She is two of the most powerful bedfellows in the country.
Yes. Yeah, there you go. And that is the Kennedy brothers, JFK and RFK, as well as, yeah, you're right, Hoover. Hoover is in there as well, but she wasn't a bedfellow with him. At least I hope not. And so this leads up to a chance meeting that's going to play, not a chance meeting. This gets us to a meeting that places her in the one possibly documented time that she is in the sheets with JFK. And that is on March 24th of 1962, Marilyn's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, she ends up telling some of the events of the day. It says Marilyn woke up. She was going on a trip. She ran over to Dr. Greenson's house, who is now treating Marilyn at his house, very unorthodoxly. unorthodox. Oh, anyways,
It's a
we'll figure
very
it out later.
unorthodox situation. Unorthodox.
Yeah.
I don't think there's an
Yeah.
OY on it.
And yeah. It's at his personal home in which she gets to have champagne and have her therapy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Very unprofessional. If you're
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna tell you right now. If you're going to a psychiatrist, psychologist, and the first thing you do is offer you champagne, you need to turn around and walk out. They're trying to impair you.
Well, I mean, no, I'm just kidding. No, walk out.
Walk
But
out.
well, Danny Greenson, Dr. Greenson's, and let me pull up a picture of him. So Danny Greenson is the one on the left, and
In
Joan
the
Greenson.
shades?
Yes, Danny's in
Oh,
the
he
shades.
looks like a douchebag.
Joan Greenson, which is Dr. Greenson's daughter, is in the dark black, blue, whatever, and his wife Hildy is the one that's right there next to him in the center of the picture. And so Danny Greenson actually tells it the best. It's quite a long quote, but I'm going to read it to you. That she had really become this household member of the family. Anthony Summers is the one interviewing him. He says, quote, "I know that your father took over the West Coast work with Marilyn in 1960, just short of 2 years that he was involved with her till she died." Danny says, "Well, I hated Hollywood." That's just how he starts it. "I hated Hollywood. My family knew enough Hollywood people. You know, I had at times met movie stars at parties and found the whole thing to be obnoxious. My notion was these people were phonies and narcissistic characters. I hated them. So when I heard that Dad was seeing Marilyn, I was not jumping up and down and cheering. He couldn't see her at the office because she was too goddamn famous. He was seeing her at home, and I thought, what a bunch of bullshit. In all the years he'd been doing that, my father had never had a patient commit suicide. He never treated anybody as unorthodoxly as he was treating her. His feeling was that because of who she was, she could never be hospitalized. So given that he couldn't do that, his feeling was the best shot he had was to try to treat her in this highly unusual, unorthodox kind of way that he did. She starts hanging out with the family. Before dinner, they would have cocktails, and that would be where the sort of pre-dinner conversation would go on. But it must have been somewhere along the line that I began to talk to her. And it was in that particular setting that I slowly but surely got to know her. Because I certainly know that my opinion changes. Within that family, I was the new arrived left-winger. So we get into these conversations, and lo and behold, Marilyn would end up on my side." Summer says, "Right." Danny says, "So a friendship developed. I began to like her and recognize that there was more to this person than met the eye." So we have this firsthand account of the son saying she was at dinner parties. She's really becoming this household member. It's very unorthodox. He's the one saying that she's being treated in an unorthodox way. So that was a little side note. Marilyn comes back home from his house having to take a shower, which her hair is done. And her mind is prepped for this meeting that she's going to have, a conversation taking place with powerful men in the government. And she puts on a wig over her newly done hair, pops on horn rimmed glasses, grabs a steno pad, and Peter Lawford and the president's new secretary, quote unquote, were ready for the trip to Palm Springs to Bing Crosby's house, which is a huge point of contention with Sinatra, because Sinatra had just redone his entire house, actually a whole floor basically, with all this Kennedy stuff, put in a helipad and everything like that. And then Bobby Kennedy calls JFK and was like, "Hey, Sinatra's pretty close ties to the mob. Might not be a good idea for you to stay there." And JFK says, "Yeah, you're right. Lawford, call him and tell him that we're not coming." And so Lawford does. Peter Lawford calls him, and Sinatra blames the whole thing on him. It ends their friendship. They never speak again. He was pissed.
He blames the whole thing on Lawford?
On Lawford. Because Lawford said it was a security issue. And he's basically like, bullshit.
Yeah, Sinatra's like, "I'll get Giancana to send me more guys."
Yeah, exactly. And so it's during the stay at Bing Crosby's house that the president, now with an undisguised Marilyn Monroe, have their one possibly documented moment of intimacy. Philip Watson, Los Angeles County assessor, was also present and also gave an eyewitness account, basically paraphrasing that he saw the intimacy between the two and they were not trying to hide it. Jackie was not there because usually when JFK went out of town, I think she might have actually been 6 months pregnant during this one. Fun.
What a stand-up guy.
Yeah, exactly. So that night, Ralph Roberts, who is Marilyn's masseuse, he gets a call from Marilyn. And she says, quote, I've been arguing. This is him saying what she quoted. Quote, I've been arguing with a friend and he thinks I'm wrong about these muscles we discuss. I'm going to put him on the phone and you can tell him. And he says the next person that he was put on the phone with, as Roberts listened, had very distinctive, familiar Boston accent. And he had no doubt in his mind that the person that he was talking to was JFK.
And we all know what the current president in office, whether it's from today, from yesterday. I could hear Reagan. I would know Reagan as many times as you hear the president's voice come over the radio, over your TV. Yeah, you see clips of them on YouTube or wherever. You know what the president's voice sounds like.
Mm-hmm. And so she actually tells him later on, yeah, I was with JFK. He was the one that I with. I actually joked with him and I told him that he should get a massage from you. And he told me that it probably wouldn't be the same. Talking to Ralph Roberts, which I'm pretty sure it wouldn't.
Of course it wouldn't be.
Ralph's not JFK's type. So, excuse me. Many of her friends knew these intimate moments that she had at this point. And she kind of, my opinion, had a little delusion happening that she was thinking that JFK was going to divorce Jackie and she would become the next Miss Kennedy and the first lady. And again, go ahead.
People get starstruck whenever they get around famous people. And yeah, I can see how you spent the night with him. Hey, he's got to like me. You know, I just spent the night with him. Yeah, sometimes they don't, you know. Kind of feel bad for her about that. She was always trying to, she was always on the hunt for someone to love her.
Oh, yeah, you know? Definitely. And very just father figure type men, powerful men. But there was another gala. I can't talk tonight. I'm sorry. But anyways,
that's okay.
There was another party that happened that she was seen by multiple witnesses running in and out of the presidential suite. Now, that could have been the second time that you have a possible documentation of her and JFK being intimate. But however, there is a note that she writes back to a friend and poet, Norman Roston, and his wife, I think it's Hedda is how it's pronounced, that told of the events of the night of this party and that she had with the president and how she was dancing with the general. Is what she kept saying, dancing with the general. Now, Joan Greenson, Dr. Greenson's wife, was interviewed in 1984 as well by Anthony Summers. And she talks about this time as well and says, quote, well, Marilyn told me that there was a new man in her life. Anthony Summers says, and what did she have to say? Joan, no, that she was just, really terrific is what he was. Hildy pipes in and says, neat, and laughs. Joan says, and he was really neat and, cute. And I mean, it was that kind of, I remember, and Hildy says, it was girly talk. And Joan says, yes, it was girly talk. I mean, she said that this person was so important that she couldn't tell me who it was. Kept calling him the general. And I remember feeling that this was real. It was real peculiar that here I am sitting with Marilyn Monroe. We're talking about boyfriends and I'm meeting some schlub at art school. And I know that she's talking about somebody that's very big in the government. And it was just, it sort of struck me as somehow bizarre. And Summer says, you mean you already knew? She says, so I didn't know whether it was with Bobby or the president, And Summer says, yeah. And Hildy says, it was simply titillating. Love that word. And Joan says, I don't even remember the guy I had a crush on back then, but it was certainly not somebody that was going to hold a candle to that. The general is the nickname that insiders used at the Department of Justice for Robert Kennedy because he was the attorney general.
The attorney, got it. I haven't heard that dancing with the general. I haven't heard that. Because you think general is military, and I was like, well, JFK, the president's always the commander-in-chief of the army, of the military, not just army, but the military. So, yeah, that's interesting because that's just descriptive enough, but not so descriptive that if you hear the general, I was literally thinking a military man, and I'm going military man, okay. I'm trying to think who were the big generals that might have been at, who are the big military personnel that might have been there. But they were
That
talking
was
about Robert.
the Attorney General. That was his
Got it.
nickname at the DOJ, was the General. Now, also at this
Hmm.
time, somebody else who speaks on this is Dean Martin's wife. Dean Martin was Rat Pack member. Good Lord, told y'all I couldn't talk. And she has an interview with Anthony Summers. Well, a lot of these interviews that I found were with Anthony Summers and his very investigative thing that he went and did trying to break open the Marilyn Monroe case in 1982, 84-ish time frame. He interviews Dean Martin's wife, and she says, quote, just the things that were going on in that beach house, talking about the Lawford's house. Not discreet at all, or of course, there was nothing discreet about any of the Kennedys either. Summers, was Marilyn there when you were? Martin, mm-hmm. Summers, there with them? Martin, mm-hmm. I mean, it was just mind-boggling. Peter would obviously be, sort of pimping for both Kennedys. They would do it just as soon in front of anybody. Yeah, their wives could be in the other room, and many times were, And Summers says, while jumping about with another lady in another room? Martin says, yeah, I mean, I found a hand up my breast. The president owned it. And Summers says, was Bobby a grabber? And she says, yeah, not in the terms that Jack was. They were tacky. They were corny. They were, the father was. Summers. Oh, yeah? Martin. They were chips off the old block. Summers. And lived up to dad. But was it your impression there? It was your impression there was a Bobby thing then, or that there was a Jack thing then? Martin. Both. Summers. I mean, you do think the brothers sharing a lady. Martin interrupts and says, I do. Didn't even let him finish the question. She just says, I do. So she's got these new love interests, we'll say. Marilyn does. And she's getting this new movie role. We're in April of 1962 at this point. So it seems like Marilyn might be on track to make a comeback. Mentally, maybe. But no, it doesn't happen. Right before filming commences on this new film, Something's Gotta Give. We all know about Something's Gotta Give. She's supposed to star in it with Dean Martin and Sid Charisse. She ends up getting sick days prior to filming starting. And she ends up having sinusitis, or a massive sinus infection that takes huge freaking rounds of antibiotics to clear up. At this time, there was another movie that was being filmed, and that was Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor. And this one was already well behind as well, and $1 to $2 million over budget. So the studio is like, God, here we go again. Marilyn's sick. Yes, she had been disruptive on The Misfits, on Let's Make Love, on Some Like It Hot, but she had never shut down filming the very first day. And they didn't believe that she was sick. So they ended up sending her to their own doctors, and the doctors are like, oh, yeah, she's got like 103 fever. Yeah, I guess she's sick. So the first day would come of shooting Something's Gotta Give, and 104 cast of crew would show up ready to shoot, and there would be no leading lady because Marilyn was too sick. She couldn't make it. However, also there was a couple other things going on at this time. We're in April of 1962. Her birthday is June 1st of 1962. Marilyn's 35 at this point. Marilyn's considered by most in Hollywood over the hill. She's aging.
Yeah.
And the news starts to kind of turn on her with that. They're like, she's still got it, but for how much longer? Marilyn's, looks, they're still there, but how much longer can she hold on? Because if you look back on her roles in her career, every movie role that she had landed was based on her looks. I mean, they were. And I think that Marilyn felt that pressure to get in front of the camera and continue to perform, being the age she was, knowing she's about to turn 36.
Well, knowing that the studio had already slapped a sell-by date on her ass.
Pretty much, Yeah. Which is crazy because Marilyn, to me, looks the best that she'd ever looked at this time. I mean, this is her filming Something's Gotta Give.
She's stunning.
Oh God, yeah, she's absolutely stunning. She's just crazy. And with all this mental stuff going on and people trying to paint her as this over the hill actress who's unprofessional and everything. Have you ever actually watched? And I think it's called. I have the footage here, so if you don't, it's called Something's Gotta Give. It's a documentary over Marilyn, and years later they found footage of Marilyn shot in being filmed by George Cukor. I can't talk tonight, y'all. I'm sorry. Anyways, and they pieced it together, and they have somewhere, I think it's between 37 or 39 minutes worth of the movie that they've pieced together that stars Marilyn in it, and it is some of the best acting she's ever done. You know, when she was there on set, she was there, especially during this time. So for several days, Cooker filmed around her, shot with Dean Martin and Sid Charisse. And so even still, I think they had gone, I think it was supposed to start on April the 14th was when filming was supposed to start. By April the 30th, they're like, she has got to come in. So she comes in for, supposed to shoot an 8-minute film, I think, or something like that. After 9 minutes, she collapses and she's sent back home. But she has a very extremely powerful moment that's about to come up in her life that we all know about. Because earlier that year, she had been invited to the president's birthday party that was going to take place in May. And even as sick as she was, Marilyn was adamant about going. She had already gotten approval from the studio to go. But now she's sick. Now she's cost them days. She's cost them money. And all of a sudden, the studio's like, no, you're not going. You need to cancel. You can forget it. And Bobby Kennedy himself placed a phone call to the studio and demanded they release her for that event that was going to be at Madison Square Garden. And told them, quote, the president wants it, and God damn it, so do I. So basically, let her go. So after filming on, I think it was like May 15th, wrapped, Marilyn, there's all of a sudden a sound of a helicopter is heard overhead. And they go outside, and a helicopter is landing on the studio lot. And Marilyn just jumps in and goes and catches a plane to New York. Because on May 17th, she defied what the fuck the studio wanted her to do. And went on to perform the now infamously, massively Happy Birthday, Mr. President on May 19th of 1962. Now, according to her hairstylist of that night, Mickey Song, this I found kind of interesting. This is an older picture of him. He's in the dressing room. There's a knock at the door, and the door opens, and supposedly it was Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy comes in and tells Mickey Song to step out. And Mickey Song has no idea what's being said, but all he can hear is Robert Kennedy's voice raising. And all of a sudden the door opens and he's like, you can go in now. By the way, do you like her? And when Mickey was like, oh yeah, enthusiastically, like, yeah, absolutely. And he goes, great, because I think she's a fucking bitch. And this is like right before she's supposedly, the night's about to start. She's like 29th performer out of 29. She actually didn't go on stage till like 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that. But, however, when she did get on stage, Marilyn being Marilyn, they had alluded to her coming on stage all night by saying, Mr. President, Marilyn Monroe. And nothing would happen. Mr. President, Marilyn Monroe. Nothing would happen. Joking about her unprofessionalism and not showing up on time. And finally, Peter Lawford introduces her and says, Mr. President, the late Marilyn Monroe. Which has always given me chills for what's to come only 3 months later, less than at this point.
That has always bothered me as well, knowing how quickly the dominoes fall that lead to her death after she is introduced as Mr. President, the late Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing. Well, I wonder what they talked about. I wonder what Bobby felt the need to go in and say to her just prior to her about to give her a worldwide known performance. They didn't know it at the time. Do you think he found out she was still hung up on JFK after she'd been hanging out with him, and that might have pissed him off?
Some of the stories that I had come across and some of the sources that I had read give the impression that what was happening that night was basically, once this is done and you're through with this, it's done with Jack. Give it up. You're done. That's what he was attempting supposedly to do, or allegedly to do.
But they asked for her to be there.
They did. She was picked to be there, to sing by them too.
But whenever you get done, honey, you can walk your ass right back out the door you came in.
Pretty much. And so that's kind of the first instance that we see her being played with. Being a plaything.
I would believe more that Bobby Kennedy was like, hey, listen, you're here because he wanted you to be here, and I can see the after tonight you're done with Jack, because it's going to be you and me. It's you and me. I don't want you banging my brother anymore.
I
I
can
don't
see
want
that
to.
too.
I would find that more to be more the case that not necessarily the president's insistence because the president asked for her.
Yeah.
But maybe the jealous brother. He's already the president. He didn't get to have
He's
you
got to
too.
have Marilyn
Yeah.
Monroe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
can see
Yeah.
that being a more legitimate conversation than, hey, he asked for you to come, but after tonight, yeah, you can't talk to him no more. Do you think? And that performance was so seductive and so direct. It was like she was melting all over that stage and
Not
melting
only that,
just
but
for him. And what a good way to stick it to the son of a bitch that says, you can't date my brother no more. Really? Honey,
yeah,
let me show you what I can do. That to me makes a hell of a lot of sense.
true. But Marilyn being Marilyn, you talk about being very seductive. She walks out on stage after she's finally introduced, and she's wrapped in that white ermine. I'm gonna give up trying
Ermine.
to pronounce words tonight. And she drops in the audience gasp because she reveals the new dress that is now so famous
And
with
damaged.
perfectly and damaged.
Yeah.
And perfectly placed rhinestones. And she goes on, like you said, to give this very seductive and alluring performance of Happy Birthday. So, to which JFK gets up on stage after. He's like, I think he says, I can now retire after being sung Happy Birthday to, from being president after being sung Happy Birthday to by Marilyn Monroe. However, Jackie Kennedy was not present at this night. I don't know if a lot of people know that or not.
I actually did know she wasn't there, but she generally tended not to be present when Marilyn was, whether that was by design. And there were rumors that some say that she knew about Marilyn, and if Marilyn was going to be there, she would refuse to be in the same room with her. She's like, really? You want her there? You go by yourself.
And when she found out that Marilyn was going to be performing, she said, screw you. I'll be in Virginia or wherever the hell she was.
Going to my mother's house or wherever.
Riding horses. And
Mhm.
there is one shot that's basically from the stage, and you can see JFK is sitting there, and there is no Jackie. Jackie did not show up at this event.
Which to me is probably one of the biggest, and again, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, very strong, very powerful woman, but had that subtle and that quiet strength about her. She was not going to be humiliated in public. She knew that the whole world knew it, but by God, she was not going to sit there and let them pity her because, oh, look, that's poor lady. She's got to sit there while her his husband's mistress sings to him on stage, which, I always think about that whenever you see these politicians that get up on stage and say, my wife and I, we're staying together, even though I had an affair, but she forgives me. And I'm always like, honey, knock him in the mouth and kick him in the balls and walk the hell off that stage. You are being humiliated in this moment. But I'll tell you, I give Jackie Kennedy all the credit. She would not be publicly humiliated or pitied or put in a position where she was going to be uncomfortable. I give her credit for that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that because she was that type of woman. So after this, Marilyn is told by her maid, by her maid, Hazel Washington, that she needs to return to the apartment after this event. It's late in the night. You're sick. You need to go back to the apartment. And Marilyn is adamant about attending this post after party, whatever it is. And this is an interesting situation here because you have Marilyn in the room with Jack and Bobby. And there are people who are reporting on their movements. You have
Of course.
You have Dorothy Kilgallen, who is writing about Marilyn and Bobby dancing up to 5 separate times. And you have another journalist, Merriman Smith, who was also taking notes, particularly on the movements of Marilyn, Bobby, and JFK. And they're out of all the photos that were taken that night, actually, out of all the photos that exist, there is one surviving photo that shows Marilyn with the Kennedy brothers. And that's this one here. And that was
they
taken.
don't look happy.
I agree.
Who took this picture? I'm sorry, I cut you off before you get to tell me.
I don't remember exactly who took the picture. This is just the.
Is it in the archives somewhere? Where can you find this picture if you want to? Is it in the National Archives or something like that?
Yes. I'll have to go
And,
and look exactly who took it.
and to be honest with you, that picture, if you notice the body language, if you're just looking at this picture, she is very, her shoulders are very straight. Her head is cocked to the side. She actually has the most powerful position in that photo. Number one, she's center. And number two, she has the position of strength. The president's head is bowed, almost as if he's being shamed in the moment, and he does not look happy. Now, even Bobby has got that head tilted down just slightly. And I know you said you look as if you thought he might be smiling. I don't think that he is smiling. I think he is actually in a guarded position in front of, right there where he can pull Marilyn Monroe away in case she wants to talk to the president just a little too much.
Yeah. I agree. And well, I look at the way her mouth is laying. And now, granted, she's probably saying something to him. I understand that.
She's probably like, you son of a bitch. Do you know what your brother just told me? Is that how you want it? Do you want that to happen? Because I can make a scene. I can definitely see that coming out of her mouth.
Yeah.
And maybe if you do think Bobby is smiling, you're kind of like, you
He's
knock that
kinda
shit
like,
off just
"Ha-ha."
any time.
Yeah.
We're not going to do that here.
But I find it very interesting about that this is the only surviving photo of JFK with Bobby and JFK, as much as they were allegedly around each other and confirmed to have been around each other. Maybe not having affairs and screwing each other, but just being in the same room with each other. And this is the only photo that exists between the three of them that has the three of them in it.
I think and that isn't a staged photo. That isn't a photo op picture. That is one of
No.
those accidental captures.
This is a candid shot.
Yes.
I
And
mean, Marilyn was very
when the camera happened.
Yeah, when the camera was on her, Marilyn was posed for the camera.
Mhm.
So she doesn't know that the camera's on her. So what I also find interesting about this night is that Merriman Smith, the journalist that was taking notes about the movements of Marilyn, Bobby, and Jack throughout the night, he gets a knock on his door at 2:30 a.m. Basically, well, it's from the Secret Service, and he puts it, quote, "They wanted to make sure I didn't write about Marilyn and Bobby." And the following morning, the Secret Service agents showed up in the photo lab at Time magazine and removed all the remaining photos of the night. And this is the last night that Marilyn was ever to see JFK again. This was it.
So don't write about Marilyn and Bobby.
Interesting, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you say something about Marilyn, the president, of course, that would be expected. She just sung happy birthday to him. Of course, he's going to be talking to her. Don't write anything about Marilyn and Bobby.
Yep.
What are you doing, Bobby? What'd you do? You don't want written about Bobby. Yo, slimy snake, Bobby, you.
So that ends. Marilyn goes back to Los Angeles. She goes back to the set of Something's Got to Give, where she films probably one of the most infamous scenes she's ever done, which was the nude swimming pool scene. No actress or actor even had done anything like that at the height of the career that she had. She'd be the first one to appear nude on film. So it was a huge thing at that point. And by the end of the month, on May 25th, Marilyn came in to film another scene with Dean Martin, Sid Charisse, and Tom Tryon, I think was the last actor that was in that. And they could just tell that something was wrong. She began stuttering on set, and Cukor kept treating her with this growing impatience until she finally just ran off set. And this is another mysterious weekend in Marilyn's life that she completely disappears for 72 hours. Nobody knows where she went. Phone calls go unanswered. Appointments are missed. Dinner dates are canceled. People said that she had an abortion. People said that she was on an LSD trip. Others said that she had an episode of madness along the same lines as her mother did. And everything was printed as fact at that point. And it was all a mixture of all of this stuff. Nobody knew where she was. Nobody knew where she went. And nobody still to this day doesn't know where she went or where she was or what she was doing. It's a mysterious weekend, but come to find out, the day prior to all of that, when she disappears on May 25th, there's an urgent conversation taking place in the White House between Kennedy and Hoover. And it's after this meeting, which the public will probably never know exactly what was said or hear a recording of it, on that same day after this meeting, that the line that Marilyn was giving her direct access to the president at the White House, was cut off on May 24th. And on May 25th is the day that she is distraught and disappears for 72 hours. Kennedy had become highly alarmed at Marilyn's indiscretion and basically called it quits with her. He told staff that if Miss Green, which was her code name, any calls from Miss Green came through, they were not to be put through.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Following along with my Bobby Kennedy theory about how he had basically said, don't you after tonight, you're not seeing JFK anymore. But that's only because he was jealous, not because JFK didn't want to do it. Could it have been that Bobby was that little chatter in JFK? Could Marilyn really have been talking, or could Bobby have just been telling him, you know what, I heard it. You know what she told me? If she's going to tell me, who knows who she's going to tell? The Giancana put her psychiatrist. What else is she going to tell? I don't know that I've ever heard anyone else other than the Kennedys allege that she is talking.
There are certain friends and people in her circle. That's the friends that I keep mentioning that are basically saying.
The father-in-law, Arthur Miller's father, that she was extremely close to, because he was very kind to her. That's one thing. Like it's kind of like if you would tell your mother or your father something, if you were, or that aunt or uncle or grandparent that you're very close to. But that's not really being loose-lipped. That's I'm your child, and I identify with you, and I know that you're a safe space for me. But I really haven't heard of a lot of people who was saying that she was just talking. I've heard the Kennedys say it a lot. And I wonder if RFK was in JFK's spirit, just going, you aren't going to believe what she's saying. You aren't going to believe what I heard. And that was a way to make sure that she and JFK were done so that he could have her for himself. Yo, snake, Bobby. Bobby, you a snake.
But you also have to remember, she's also being followed by the FBI at this point.
Yes, she is.
And there's actually a whole instance that I kind of skipped over. Was back in I believe it was February of 1962. She took a trip down to Mexico because she was wanting to buy furniture for the house, the Brentwood house, the one on Fifth Helena Drive, that she ended up buying. And she ends up running into Fred Vanderbilt Field, who was a former Vanderbilt who got thrown out of their orbit for his communist ties. She runs into all of these people down there. Jose Bolaños, Mexican director. All these people have communist ties down there, who their people are talking directly to Fidel Castro. So that gets back to Hoover, that she's down in Mexico cohorting with these people.
Even though she may or may not have been, she might have just been in the same area. She might have never seen them. But because she's in the same area, all those famous people, they all know each other, right? That's as ridiculous as it sounds. That very well could have been that just because they were in the same country.
I take that back. She was I'll put the record straight. She was spotted on one occasion that I know of for sure off the top of my head with Vanderbilt Field while she was down there.
The ousted rich boy.
The former Vanderbilt, yes. So Kennedy made Peter Lawford make the phone call to Marilyn. That's my thing. That's what pisses me off about Kennedy. He won't talk to her.
He would
himself.
not. Yeah. Everything that. Yeah. Well, he had plenty of yes men, much as
of course.
Many presidents have. Yeah. Are people who do the jobs that they don't want to do.
And so Lawford knew he had to be so blunt with Marilyn that there was absolutely no denying that it was through.
He had to hurt her bad enough that she didn't want to come back.
Mm-hmm. And Patricia Kennedy, Peter Lawford's wife and sister to JFK and RFK, is quoted as saying, quote, "There was no effort to let her down easily. She was told that she'd never be able to speak to the president again and that she was never going to be the first lady. She was not even a serious affair. And when Marilyn broke down, Peter said, 'Look, Marilyn, you're just another one of Jack's fucks.'" And left it at that. And so Marilyn had now been rejected by the most powerful man in the world, or the country, if not the world. There are stories during this time. This is kind of the first, I don't know, mental break she has with involving the Kennedy brothers because there's multiple sources that state that she was calling everybody, trying to get the number to get a hold of Jack. She even called Patricia Kennedy and was like, give me the number to Jack. I want the number. And Patricia is quoted as saying that they got into an argument and gave her the number, but there's never been any record that the number was actually ever used. So I don't know what she was.
Well, she's saying she gave her the number, but if that number had been disconnected, then of course it's never going to go through.
Very true. So Marilyn goes through this whole weekend of 72 hours where she just completely disappears, but she returns to set the following week on May 28th, as if nothing ever happened.
Well, we've all been through that bad breakup where you just want to be by yourself and you want all the noise to stop. And it's like, I'm just going to cry and I'm going to eat ice cream and I'm going to sit in a hot bath and I'm not going to get out of bed. And I will pull myself back together. And then come Monday, everything, I'm going to be back to, I'm going to yank everything apart. Then I'm going to pack it all back in that suitcase. And on Monday morning, I'm going to show up where I'm supposed to be. And I'm going to be smiles and happy. And nobody's ever going to know what this did to me. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'll totally agree with that. So on June 1st, 1962, it's Marilyn. Marilyn turned 36. It's her birthday. There was a celebration for her on set, but she had no idea that this would be her last day in front of a camera ever. Cooker was pretty much upset with her. He was like, "There's no way we're throwing this birthday party on the set. Like, I'm just freaking pissed about it." And she left that day because she had a muscular dystrophy. Event at Dodger Stadium that she had to attend. And there was this cold, wet, descending mist that was forming over the city. And they just knew if Marilyn went, she was going to be sick. And Marilyn went. And on the way home, the blinding pain of the sinus infection returned. And Marilyn comes down with this, and they say, no effing way, we're freaking done. And on June the 8th, she is fired from her contract for Something's Gotta Give, and she's slapped with a lawsuit for damages ranging between, I've heard, between $500,000 and $1 million. Happy 36th birthday, Marilyn. So she tries to turn her
sick.
For being sick. Yeah, that's the biggest thing. So she tries to turn to her psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson, but he's out of the country at this point. So she calls on Joan and Danny Greenson for help. And Danny goes over there and he basically says, this is not the Marilyn everybody knows. She can't sleep. She doesn't look like Marilyn. She looks horrible. But he said that in the conversations he had with her that time that he showed up, it really seemed that Marilyn was catching on to this the ploy of these powerful men that she had associated with herself with, that they were using her, that they were getting what they want from her. And they were anyway. So, what was I going to say? Oh yeah. Sorry, that they were using her. And on top of this, when she figures this out, the studio begins one of the worst, negative slams, slurs, whatever you want to call it, against one of their own.
A smear campaign.
Smear campaign, basically. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. And sent out advertisements to local newspapers that read, quote, Miss Monroe is not just being temperamental. She's mentally ill, perhaps seriously. Signed, Fox Studios. Quote, the poor dear has finally gone round the bend. The sad thing is the little work she did is no good. I think it's the end of her career. Signed, George Cukor. Quote, thank you, Dean Martin and Miss Monroe, for the loss of our livelihoods. Signed, the cast and crew of Something's Gotta Give. I come to find out, nobody said any of this shit. This was something that was used by the studio that was sent out to hurt Marilyn for basically costing the studio so much money, because the studio was dying for money at this point. I mean, they were hurting. They had Cleopatra that was running them over budget. Marilyn was screwing things up. You know, it just was not a good time.
Well, you have to remember, too, that as soon as they released her, there would be a studio that scooped her up unless they made her box office poison.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as they probably should have kept her, this was a director who lost his mind, couldn't deal with the people. Yes, they were over budget. Yes, I'm sure he was getting, but your job as a director is to work around it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if they didn't make her look like box office poison, someone was going to scoop her up. Someone was going to let her heal, and someone was going to give her a chance to make money for them. So yeah, you have to destroy her credibility in that moment if you don't want someone else to make you look foolish for releasing Marilyn Monroe from your contract. And that might have been the way for the director to save his ass as well. So look, she was crazy. She's finally done. You
Mm-hmm.
know, she can't take it. You know, she was nuts. Could not be directed. Rather than I would got tired of her antics of
See,
being sick.
yeah, none of them actually ever said that. George Cukor is actually quoted as saying Marilyn will become one of the biggest stars of this entire century. He adored her. She is quoted as saying that he treated her the best that she had ever been treated on any set. So
And that's the director.
that's a director. And you actually
Okay.
have a couple of people who quit their jobs in retaliation from these things being posted in the newspapers. Now, one thing I find interesting that I was digging and I did find is that coincidentally, the Attorney General's telephone records indicate a number of calls to a guy named Judge Rosenman. I do not have a picture of him. Just prior to Marilyn's firing. Now, I'm gonna package this the best that I can for you. Follow me here. Judge Rosenman is a close friend of the Kennedys and chairman of 20th Century Fox in 1962. It was instrumental in the purchase of the backlot of 20th Century Fox to the Great Lakes Carbon Corporation, owned by Ethel Skagel Kennedy's family.
Michael Skakel, the
For
yeah. Mhm.
for the development of oil drilling and also played a major part in securing Bobby Kennedy a film deal in his book, The Enemy Within, which, by the way, I heard bombed and was horrible, and I don't think it ever actually even got made. Now, it's rumored that both Skakel and Kennedy money was involved in the takeover of the studio in 1960 after Buddy Adler's death, who was the chairman at the time. Now, whether or not Bobby Kennedy played an intimate role in Marilyn's dismissal, that's still kind of up for debate. But even so, one thing
But
that
he had to have
mattered,
known about it.
exactly, one thing that mattered the most to Marilyn was being held hostage, and that was her career. So it's rumored that Marilyn knew of Bobby's ploy and her dismissal, which resulted in a denial of the one invitation she ever denied to a Kennedy function ever by telegram that read, quote, "Dear Attorney General and Mrs. Robert Kennedy, I would have been delighted to have accepted your invitation honoring Pat and Peter Lawford. Unfortunately, I am involved in a freedom ride protesting the loss of the minority rights belonging to the remaining earthbound stars. After all we demanded was our right to twinkle. Signed, Marilyn Monroe." So Marilyn did what Marilyn does best. She fought back. And between June the 20th and July the 15th, Marilyn began this huge media blitz with leading syndicated columnists and nonstop series of interviews and photo shoots with Vogue, Life, Red Book, Cosmopolitan. She vehemently went against the studio and basically told the interviewers that she was being picked on, that the executives were allowed to get sick, but how dare one of their stars get sick. Fans began to write letters to the studio, like bashing the studio for firing her, saying that they were wrong. Dean Martin refused to continue on making Something's Got to Give with anybody but Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe, with the help of Pat Newcomb, her publicist at the time, sent 104 telegrams, each one to the cast and crew of Something's Got to Give, explaining that it was the studio's decision to shut down filming, that it had nothing to do with her. And with all of these candid interviews and talking that Marilyn was doing, according to Fox Archives, Judge Rosenman was contacted by Bobby Kennedy to renegotiate Marilyn's contract. Marilyn's talking too much. She's in the press too much. She's blabbing. She's running her mouth. She's telling the truth. We got to shut her up. And so 16 days later, the studio does a complete about face, and Marilyn Monroe was reinstated with her contract at the studio with the biggest deal she ever got out of her entire career. $500,000 to complete Something's Got to Give with an additional bonus upon completion. Another movie deal after that, and an additional $500,000. Appeared Marilyn had won. She got her contract. However, she didn't sign it right away. She had won, but at what price? It's always my question. So shortly after her victory, she's reinstated. There's a July barbecue that was held at Pat and Peter Lawford's, at which both Marilyn and Bobby were in attendance, according to eyewitnesses. This was some type of conciliatory gathering, and it appeared that all the issues between Marilyn and the Kennedys were mended. Everything was fine. And according to FBI documents, Marilyn and Bobby go take a stroll on the beach at this gathering, and whatever was discussed between them became the subject of national security matter in an FBI document dated July the 13th, 1962.
And again, how is she knowing this if these men aren't talking? She's getting blamed for talking, but somebody had to tell her. Sounds like a bunch of yappy men to me.
Yeah. So, of course, the subject of what was discussed has been heavily redacted, and we can only assume, based on the movements of Bobby Kennedy himself and the confirmation of an FBI informant. So on July 17th of 1962, Bobby Kennedy met with General Maxwell Taylor, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to view the first hydrogen bomb test in the continental U.S. Back then, completely top secret. Okay, we're in July. We're in mid-July. Early July was the barbecue. Okay. We know Marilyn had knowledge of H-bomb testing because of the last interview she gave to I think it was Alan Levy of Red Book. When he asked, "What do you dream?" Marilyn replies, quote, "My dreams are too intimate to be revealed in public." Levy asked, "What is your nightmare?" Marilyn replied, "My nightmare is the H-bomb. What's yours?" Well, how would she know what the hell it is if she doesn't already know about it? Number one. And I'm going to give you another roadmap to follow. So, if you want more clarification on this, July 1962, U.S. surveillance satellites obviously photographed new long-range ballistic missile installations in Cuba. JFK receives yet another confidential document, the same document for earlier, dated July 13th, 1962, from the FBI office in Mexico City, titled, quote, "Marilyn Monroe, Security Matter -C." C meant communist. Now, this file was withheld from Marilyn's FBI file, but survives in highly redacted or highly censored, whatever you want to call it, form in the FBI files of Peter Lawford and Frederick Vanderbilt Field, the former Vanderbilt that we were talking about earlier. Under the Freedom of Information appeals process, Freedom of Information attorney James Lassar was told by the FBI that the source of the censored information in the Monroe memo was an informant. And the FBI had been requested by another intelligence agency, the CIA, not to reveal the informant's name. And the FBI disclosed to Lassar that the source was someone who knew both Field and Marilyn. And there's only 4 people who fit that category.
I'm thinking Peter Lawford's a rat.
That is housekeeper Eunice Murray, Eunice's brother-in-law Churchill Murray, Mexican director Jose Bolaños, and Maryland psychiatrist Dr. Greenson. Those are the 4 that fit that knew both Field and Monroe. The likely informant in this is going to be Jose Bolaños because Vanderbilt Field had warned her to stay away from him, basically. And back in March of 1962, he attended the Golden Globes with her and was her date to the Golden Globes. And he stated that he has stated that he visited Marilyn in New York in April of 1962, and the last time that he ever saw her was early July of 1962. And he's further confirmed, in my opinion, as the source of the FBI's disclosure, because the memo states that, quote, the informant heard it directly from Marilyn, or that it was heard directly from Marilyn by the informant. Marilyn is quoted as saying that she, quote, attended a luncheon at Peter Lawford's residence with one of the Kennedy brothers. And one of the significant questions that this informant says was raised at this meeting was the morality of atomic testing. So basically what ended up happening is that this guy, Robert Kennedy, is running his freaking mouth to Marilyn while they're walking on the beach. This is days before he's to go see the H-bomb testing.
Sounds like he's more of a leak. Sounds like he's more of a leak than she is.
And here's my favorite way to sum that up by the Anthony Summers himself. He says, I'm going to quote him. He says, quote, "They were bloody idiots, weren't they? Because she was in touch with people who were regarded as communists, all of whom were talking to Fidel Castro's people. Political risk was extreme. This is very possibly the thing to which the Kennedy says, shit, if she can make public what we've been discussing, nuclear matters at this critical time. We've got to stop all this. We can't deal with Marilyn Monroe anymore." And on Tuesday, July 17th, Marilyn Monroe's phone records indicate she attempted to reach the Attorney General at the Department of Justice switchboard, but she was not put through because it was too late. Bobby Kennedy had an emergency meeting prior to July 17th, but after the barbecue with, you guessed it, Hoover. And immediately following that meeting, Marilyn was cut off from the Attorney General. As told by Arthur James, her long-term friend, who says, Bobby says, so when did the Bobby, I mean, Summers says, Anthony Summers says, so when did the Bobby thing start? James says, after Jack. Summers says, but you believe, sorry, but you have the impression that there had been in phase relationship with both of them, did you? James, yes. Yes, but in 1961, the meeting headquarters was Peter Lawford's house in Malibu. Summers and Bobby lasts well into the presidency, right? That goes on, and James interrupts and says, yes, that's what she said on numerous occasions. And again, she just didn't lie. She spoke quite openly. Summers says, what picture did she paint of the state of the Kennedy thing at that point? James, oh, nothing but love, nothing but admiration. And he says, we met in Laguna a month before she died. This is Arthur James, her longtime friend, talking. And Summers asks him, Anthony Summers says, and what sort of, was that just for supper or something? And James responds and says, she came down for the weekend and she told us what had really taken place with the Kennedys. He says, I can go into the dirt or I can go into lots of other things, but she was hurt, terribly hurt when, and he hesitates, she was told directly never to call or contact again. Anthony Summers says, to Robert, not talk to Robert anymore. James says, Robert or John. And Summers says, right. They had both said, that's it, no more. And he says, James responds and says, well, no, that was an order. Summers says, both of them said to her, that's the end of it. And James says, no, Jack didn't contact her. He said, Bob did. And that's what killed her. And he said, I don't care what anyone else says. It was the beginning of the last day, if you will. End quote. So you also have another one of Marilyn's friend, Robert Slatzer, at this time. Marilyn's furious. Something's happened between her and Bobby. She can't get a hold of him and all this shit. And she calls him and she basically screams at him, damn it, he owes me an explanation. I want to know what happened and I want Bobby to tell me himself. And during the remainder of July, Marilyn's phone records again indicate she tried to reach Bobby up to 8 separate occasions at the Department of Justice, as well as at his Hickory Hill house. And that move, the Hickory Hill house phone calls, is what infuriated Bobby Kennedy, according to Pat Lawford Kennedy, or Patricia Kennedy, however you want to call her. And so that's when Robert Slatzer comes back into the picture and says, hey, I spent the day with Marilyn whenever all of this took place. And that's when she ended up showing me her little red diary, and I thumbed through it. And there was all kinds of shit in there. Inside, he had seen notes on Kennedy regarding the Bay of Pigs, on Castro, the Mafia, Jimmy Hoffa, Sam Giancana. I mean, they were all in there.
Little red book.
That is what is supposedly
Seems
said.
Slightly exaggerated. I mean, how many pages does that damn little red diary have in it?
Well, it's supposedly said by not just him, but 2 other people as well, that they had seen the inside of the book, and all of this was in there as well. 2 other separate people. Because when he pressed her on it, he said, why are you keeping all this? She said, well, one time Bobby got mad at me and said that I don't ever remember anything that we talk about, so I started writing everything down. And so she's in this horrible situation because she hadn't signed her contract either. Her new contract that she's got. We're at the end of July at this point, towards the end of July. She hadn't signed her new contract. And the reason being is because Daryl Zanuck, who was one of her flings way back when, he's attempting to take back over the studio at this point. And she is waiting for him to make his boardroom, I guess, blow up or whatever on July the 25th and oust the people who are in charge and him take over, so that she can then be out from underneath Judge Rosamond's or the Kennedys' thumb. Because there's that connection. And on July 25th, Daryl Zanuck does win his boardroom battle. And that's it. Marilyn's free. She can do whatever she wants. She wanted the Kennedys in check. She didn't want to be under their thumb anymore. And she decides to put her motion into place to give a tell-all about what's been going on. And she's going to let it go to the public. But before that, there's going to be another chance meeting at the Cal Neva Lodge. And that's going to be called The Lost Weekend. That we will be covering on the next episode of the Monroe Files, when we cover the Lost Weekend of Marilyn Monroe's life. Whatever the relationship is, I'll leave you with this. Whatever the relationship was between Marilyn and the Kennedy brothers, they are playing with fire. Because she is about to freaking
A lot of
lose
match.
it. And she was the perfect situation, and the perfect situation was forming for dirt to be gained on Jack and Bobby Kennedy. But it would never happen. And that's pretty much Marilyn and the Kennedy brothers. Oh, but it did. You're right. It's pretty much Marilyn and the Kennedy brothers. So on the next time on the Monroe Files, anyways, no. Anything you want to add? I mean, you want to discuss a minute? I don't care.
I am fascinated with the conspiracy aspect of it. And I really do think that it wasn't JFK's decision to cut Marilyn Monroe out of his life. I really think that that was a jealousy thing that Robert Kennedy had, was just could not stand to see his brother be president. And he's got Marilyn Monroe. Because as soon as his brother's dead, what does he do? He going to run for president now too. Sounds like sibling rivalry and jealousy. And just the fact that he would call her a bitch to people that were close to her. And that's pretty much publicly something that could be traced back to a high-ranking person. I don't ever recall any reports of JFK ever calling her a bad name in public.
I've never found any.
So it sounds like that, in my opinion, and my opinion alone, and I'm allowed to have that, is that Robert Kennedy was a classless piece of shit. If he's going to go around calling people names in public, well, that works two ways, Mr. Bobby. I don't necessarily think that JFK wanted her out of his life. I think perhaps someone got a little jealous.
I can totally see that. I can get on board with what I can pick up what you're throwing down.
You see where I'm going with this?
I can, because you are right. You are right. And I will say that there is, every time that I have found something about Marilyn's loose lips, it's always been friends or close acquaintances. Those are the words that are used. There's never an actual person that says, "Oh, she was telling me
and
this."
It's from someone who was put in her life.
Yes, it was. So I can definitely jump on board with what you're saying. That would make total sense to me. Were people actually hearing these things from her, or was Marilyn talking?
Mm-hmm. Or was somebody saying, "Hey, you need to go tell JFK that Marilyn is saying this"? Well, did she say it? It doesn't matter. Go tell him she said it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to protect the president.
So I can jump on board with that. Maybe it was a jealousy thing. Maybe it was sibling rivalry. Maybe he wanted her all to himself.
And maybe Hoover wanted one of the Kennedy brothers all to himself. If we're throwing out crazy theories.
True.
We're just throwing out crazy theories. People don't come at me.
Well, that was one thing that supposedly the mafia had on Hoover was Hoover in compromising positions that would destroy not only his career, but his manhood, masculinity, whatever you want to call it. I mean, Hoover was a known cross-dresser, I guess.
Yeah,
I mean, he cross-dressed.
Yes.
There were alleged photos that the mafia had of him in these moments that he was cross-dressing. That could have ended everything.
Which is why, until Bobby Kennedy came in, that the FBI kind of left the mob alone. Well, plus two, it's alleged that Daddy Kennedy had said that, you get my kid in office, and we'll just we're sorry, we're not looking over here.
Yeah,
we're gonna
exactly.
Everybody watch over here.
Exactly. Yeah.
And Bobby decided he was going to come in and start, pissing on the trees and marking his territory, making a name for himself.
Yeah, trying to throw around that power. Absolutely.
He's playing whose dick's bigger.
Exactly. Well, Shelley, I thank you for joining me on the first part of Monroe Files. We've got 5 more to go.
I am forming my own theories here, and my mind's been a little changed on a couple of things.
Well, good. I'm glad I could help with that. But next week, we're going to be talking about the Lost Weekend. So y'all hang tight, because shit only gets crazier from here. But
And our
anyways,
theories probably do too.
probably. Yes, they do. Because I'll tell you what mine is at the very end of this mini-series. Well, y'all, thanks so much for tuning in. For myself, my name is Blake Smith. For my friend, you're on this side tonight. That's right. Miss Shelley Pruitt. We thank you so much, and we will see you next week. Bye, y'all.
Bye.